Hey, everybody. I'm Todd Recknagel, and I am so glad that you're here with us today. And I'm very excited about today's podcast. This is part of our Fran Faith or our franchise faith community, and some of the podcast and content that we're able to put out to you. I have an amazing special guest today. And he's going to be talking a little bit on how to find your purpose in life and give us a little bit of that journey that he's been on. And so I don't want to take away any of his thunder as he talks a little bit about going through the journey, but we are just so privileged to have Lloyd Reeb here with us, who is actually one of the co-founders of Halftime, a book author, a renowned speaker, and coach, and happens to also be my close friend. And so, Lloyd, just so great to have you here today, and appreciate you being on our podcast.
Thank you, Todd. Yeah, you journey together, you learn together, right? So your listeners learn and you learn from them, and you and I've learned from each other about how to make a great life. So, yeah, let's dive into it.
Yeah. Well, I know if we go backwards in your journey a little bit, one of the things that I didn't mention in the introduction is that you became a very, very successful businessman. Going back in your journey, you were mentored by Bob Buford, who wrote the book on Halftime, and then decided to co-found the organization with Bob. So maybe tell us a little bit about how some of that started.
Yeah, I've always loved real estate, Todd, as you know, and developed my first subdivision in my early 20s and didn't spend a penny of it, right? Any entrepreneur can relate to your first deal. You're tempted to buy a cool car, and then you realize, you know what? Money compounds. So let's not buy something that's going to go down in value. So I took that money and we built our first independent care facility for seniors in 1988. We still own that building. And then we built some others. And along the way, I got asking the question, what is all this winning costing me? It's a fundamental cost accounting question. And very few times does an older person really confront you with the wisdom of a powerful question like that. And I wondered, what is all this wealth creation for anyway? And if life turned out perfectly, how would I know? I was running a series of sort of 5-year goals, but with no long term key performance indicators, no long term metrics, if you will, for my life. And that's where wisdom of a mentor comes in, right? Having
Wow.
somebody older that looks into your life and says, what are you chasing?
So, clearly you were a young man as you're on this journey. And so, did you ponder these questions on your own, or was Bob Buford part of that, or just knowing and having a mentor in Bob? How did that come about?
Well, at first I was asking these questions myself. When you're kind of blindsided by some measure of success, if you're honest with yourself, you think, I'm just not that smart. There's a whole lot of things that converged here, right? First of all, I was born in America, which is a huge head start. I was born in a family where my dad ran a national valuation consulting company. So I kind of grew up with the essence of business seeping through me. I got a great education at McGill University. These are all things that were given to me. And to whom much is given, much is expected. And so I I thought, so what am I doing with all this winning? And I was kind of in my late 20s, early 30s, and our kids were 8, 6, and 3. And I remember going home and saying to Linda, hey, I've been running the numbers, and if we live relatively simply, we can live on what we have now for the rest of our life and figure out what God has for us. I mean, what was my purpose put on this planet for? And she looked at me, Todd, and she said, are you kidding me? I mean, we got braces coming. We've got college education coming. Are kids ever going to get to Disney World? And I just said to her, look, our ability to create wealth is never going to go away. But now we have some freedom. What if we just look up from our desk and start thinking about long term? What do you really want? So that was my early thinking. And I wrote out a 5-year plan then to kind of build freedom. One of the important questions we asked ourselves that I'd encourage all of our listeners to ask is, in a word or two, what does money mean to you? Money can mean security. It can mean sort of street cred. It can mean luxury or lifestyle. We landed on freedom. We felt like the most valuable thing money could give us was the freedom to live the life we were designed to live. But then I didn't know how to find what that was.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. I know that we've talked a little bit about as we've been on this journey, we've done so many deals, and many of the people that are in our listening audience here are in franchising or own businesses. And one more deal or one more year of a greater revenue or another year of gained profits isn't always going to bring happiness for sure. And so we've talked about that journey also, kind of finding that greater purpose in your life. So then, how did that lead to halftime? How did you decide to get into a ministry for others and be able to help others in that journey?
Yeah, well, I that was an early conversation. It was very helpful to have those disruptive conversations. We weren't always comfortable talking it through with Linda. When I talked it through with friends, frankly, they weren't very helpful. They were very often like, "Well, cry me a river. Come back when you got a real problem." So when you're achieving some measure of success, you've got to get with other people who have been successful to think your confusion out loud. And so along the way, I was talking to a friend, and he said, "Well, you need to meet this guy, Bob Buford. He's just written a book called Halftime, and he's thought through the same things you're thinking about." And let me just cut to the chase that we're in a great business to make a difference in people's lives. When you take care of seniors, when you take care of grandmas and grandpas, you've got an opportunity to bring compassion every single day. There's always someone moving in crisis because their spouse passed away or someone's had a stroke. Very often purpose is hidden in plain view when you slow
Right.
down a little bit and you think about it. But Bob Buford took me under his wings. He was 22 years older than me and mentored me. The power of a mentor is absolutely incredible. And so he said to me one day, "Lloyd, I want you to make two lists. Grab a pad of paper. I want you to make two lists." He said, "On the right side, I want you to write down everything you have that's valuable." And then he was quiet. And I started buildings and stocks and houses. And we had a farm at the time. And, it was fun. It was a fun list. I was kind of grinning probably on the way down the list. And then he said, "Okay, very good. Good little trier. Now, on the other side, I want you to make a list of everything you have that's priceless." And it just sucked the wind out of my lungs.
Wow.
And I'm like, well, I was tempted to write my business down, that the business is not priceless because it has a value. And then I made a list. There's a short list. And he said, "Now, Lloyd, let's look at this. Let's confront the brutal facts. How are the things on the right side, those valuable things, how are they protected?" Sure enough, check, check, check. Every one of them was insured to replacement costs. It was carefully protected. But lo and behold, a lot of the things on the priceless side were largely unprotected.
Yeah.
So that's a wake up call. And that's kind of where you start is triage. If you're going to build a great life, the first thing you do is take the time to protect the priceless things: my reputation, my health, my relationship with God, Linda, our kids, a few friends. I mean, you think, make your own list, but that's where you start. Long before you say, "How am I going to conquer the next hill?" or "Am I going to change world poverty?" or "Am I going to, solve cancer?" You start by triage. Protect the priceless things in our lives.
Yeah. Wow, what an amazing piece of wisdom that is. Um, yeah, there's so many different directions I could go there because I know you have taken me through some deep, thought-provoking questions in my journey as well, similarly, and so you've been a great mentor to me. One of them I can remember is kind of not only taking what's priceless today and what you value, but then also looking out at those 30-year metrics. So say you live out the balance of your life if you're an older person, and what do you value? What do you want some of those priceless things to think of you? How do you want God to reflect on you? How do you want your family to reflect on you? How do you want your friends to reflect on you? And I think that a lot of society maybe kind of goes through that what would you want your eulogy to say? But that at that point, you're dead already, right? I mean, and that is so. What would they want to say about you after you've already died? When you took me through an amazing journey to find purpose and to try to understand a little bit of that, to be intentional about what I want to do in that time period. And that was profound for me. Would you mind kind of walking folks through that a little bit in terms of some of the things that we worked on that journey?
Yeah. Bob and I started the Halftime Institute in 1998 to try to help people get clear on what they want, get free from the things that are low value, and get going. Get clear, get free, get going. Simple concept. And actually, when you break it into small pieces, there's nothing super complicated about it, but it does require a high degree of intentionality. And I would caricaturize it, Todd, as the pursuit of intentionality without insisting on control. Peter Drucker once told us that the most unhappy people he knows are planners. And I thought to myself, well, wait a minute, you're the guy that basically wrote the books on strategic planning. Are you changing your mind? And no, at 90, he was just simply saying that if you stick too tightly, if you hold on like white knuckle your plan and you insist it's going to execute exactly as you wrote it out, you're going to be deeply disappointed. But he
Yeah.
said the plan frames up your thinking so that you can see opportunities when they come and you can decipher good things from high value things from low value things. And you know how to respond quickly when an opportunity surfaces because you've done the hard work of thinking. And that's what you're alluding to is to begin our next season of life with a longer term perspective. So there's a couple ways to get at that. One is simply to ask a metrics question. Your life turned out perfectly. What would the elements be? Now, one way to think about that is I'm 63 now. So suppose I live to 93, which would be wonderful. My dad is 93, turning 93 next week. So, and suppose you and I sat down there by the wall, by the ocean where you are on a bench, two old guys, 93 years old, just so happy to be sitting in the sunshine. And I look over at you and I say, Todd, gosh, those 30 years went so fast. I mean, think about it. You got 30s now.
Yeah.
And suppose you look at me and you say, you're right. Gosh, it went so fast. And then I say, Todd, how did it go for you? And you look off in the distance and you basically forget that I'm there and you're deep in thought. And you scroll through your mind and you look back at me and you say, you're not going to believe it. It went perfectly. What would you have to scroll through in the back of your mind to draw that conclusion? Now, those are long term metrics. And what you want to do is decouple what you want from how you'd measure it. Don't worry about how you measure it to start with. Just write down all the things that you want in order you would have to scroll through in the back of your mind to draw the conclusion 30 years from now that your life those 30 years had gone perfectly. Now, it's not about control. This is not about control. This is about the longings of your heart.
Yeah.
I have six metrics. I've lived with them for 20 some years now, and they have become a plumb line in my life. You and I would never build a strategy for a new franchise or who didn't have an idea of what they wanted the win to be, what a win would look like.
Right.
What's the purpose of Massage Envy or whatever? You got these series of franchises you own. Imagine if your staff show up at all those salons and they have no idea what the purpose of the enterprise is. And so my metrics are number one, I would have worshiped God every day. That's a huge source of joy for me personally. It may not be for everybody. For me, it's a source of joy. Second, I would become someone who gives extravagantly. So you've heard of kind of a tithe, right? Which is you give 10% back to society and you keep 90%. I would love to be the opposite. I'd love to be spending 10% and giving 90% because the joy is on the other side of serving. The most miserable people in my retirement homes are the ones that still think it's all about them. And the most cheerful people is like this little old lady that comes out of her room every morning and she goes up to our staff. I mean, she's paying to be there. She goes up to our staff and says, honey, what can I do to help you today? Think about that. Isn't that a better way to live than saying one lady, she stopped me in the dining room and she said, Mr. Reeb, Mr. Reeb. So this is an 80-year-old lady. Can I talk to you? I said, yes, yes, ma'am. And I sat down. She said, my ice cream is too cold. And I said to her, you know what, Mrs. Smith? That is one problem that's going to solve itself.
Well, I do find it kind of ironic that God put you in a perfect place, such a time as this, where as a young man, you were able to take care of the elderly and see some of those later in life metrics, if you will, early on. And so that probably had a little bit of its profound effects too. Yeah, I agree. Oftentimes when we think about whether we're in the massage business or even with some of our beauty pros, they're oftentimes, they have a person in a chair, they have them in a room for an hour, and they're hands-on touch, serving and healing people. And so it is a profound effect when you can be in a business where you're actually bringing that as part of the culture. And so it is interesting to look at the life differently. Instead of a means to the ends to make money or to, hey, let's build this deal and then sell it, you can actually look at your daily activity intentionally and say, hey, how do we serve people? How do we serve others? So I know when you took me through the journey, you had me look at some of those perfect life metrics, what that would look like, and then you brought me back to that intentionality. And you just mentioned three of the areas, three of the six areas that you talked about, the generosity and serving God. And it was interesting. I can remember that you would take me through some of your team or even part of the halftime program, you'd take them through strengths assessments and joy assessment of some of the areas that people are both strong in. Like, for example, with our company, we're quite good at doing a plan for a company and for looking out at 2 or 3 years. But until you brought that up with me, I had never really done any kind of plan on a personal level to look at that intentionality or look at my own strengths of, hey, I'm a great encourager. So how do I encourage those around me or intentionally spend time on my calendar to do that? And so maybe you can talk a little bit about sort of building on some of those skills early on and then pivoting into that purpose to help people find their own purpose.
Yeah, so if we work at this like a little bit of a map, get clear on what's priceless in your life, and as a triage, protect it, and then get clear on what you really want long term. In my case, worship God every day, become someone who gives extravagantly, love a few people extraordinarily. So Linda and the kids, and now we have 6 kids and 5 grandbabies, some friends, make 100x impact in compassion in this world. That's a fourth metric. Jesus, if you're coming from a faith perspective, Jesus talked about your life as if it was soil, and you're given seeds in your life. And now you can either produce nothing, you could be kind of tangled up soil, or you could be great, rich soil that produces 30x, 60x, 100x. And I just decided I want my life to be 100x. Now, that's not really about me, but it's about being available. And so that's one of my metrics is I want to see my life be the soil that produces 100-fold. And so we have something now called the 100X Forum, 100xforum.org, where we help people who seriously want to be a multiplier. They want to see their talent, their time, their resources, their influence, their network bless hundreds, if not thousands of people's lives. And then the fifth metric is to stay in top shape. And lastly, spend my life surrounded by beauty. And that's just very personal. I'm filled up by beauty, and ugly is a beatdown for me. So I don't do ugly. So with that in mind, now you ask yourself, okay, those are the priceless things I'm protecting. That's my long-term metrics or desires. Now, what's my calling? What's my purpose? There was a French poet that wrote once that when you discover your destiny, if you don't follow it, it follows you like an accusing shadow. So, what is it in my life that I can't not do? What is it that brings so much joy, that aligns so deeply with my unique abilities, that when I do it, it's just like magic? And if I didn't do it, it would follow me like an accusing shadow looking over my shoulder. So yesterday I was in Fort Worth and I led 8 people through the second meeting of a year-long journey called the 100X Forum, and watching these leaders come alive. One guy's an architect, but he's got 1,000 employees. Have you ever heard of an architect firm with 1,000 employees?
Yeah.
And
Wow.
so a friend of his called the day after the Uvalde school shooting. 20 children lost their lives. And his friend asked him a simple question. Chris, should those little boys and girls get their backpack on and go back in that school? And he couldn't get that question out of his mind. And he decided, no, there's no way that a little 7-year-old girl should get her backpack on and go back in that school after all the trauma of watching her friends get shot. Just so happens he's the leading designer of safe schools in America. And so he decided he was going to design them a school for free. And then he called a contractor who was a friend of his and said, look, you've built a lot of buildings for me, a lot of schools. I'm going to ask you to do one for free. And so his contractor agreed to do the entire construction of the new Uvalde school at cost. And then he called a 93-year-old friend who sold a grocery chain and is worth billions of dollars and said to him, I'm designing a new school for Uvalde, one of the really poor community that hasn't had a new school in 50 years, and they've lost 20 some children. It's going to cost $60 million. Would you fund it? And his 93-year-old friend said, no, but I'll fund half of it and I'll help you raise the rest of the money. And just go Google it. Go Google the new school in Uvalde, and it's on the second floor. They're building the second floor already. That's
That's
one guy who had the dream that his life would really count. And then he took his skills and a crisis happening in the world and simply converged them. And I don't think he's ever cried about another construction project. But that project will bring him to his knees when those little boys and girls go back in a brand new school. Now, the solemnness of it is it will never make up for the loss of those little children. So it's not designed to. It's not any kind of compensation for the loss they've had. It's
right.
simply a gesture from the rest of America
Yeah.
to that impoverished community that we haven't forgotten about. Now, that can be true in everybody's life. You don't have to be an architect with 1,000 employees. You can have one franchise en route to two, and you can look around and know the first names of everybody that works for you. And you can ask, how is your child doing that's on the spectrum somewhere? And what's the most meaningful thing I could do to be useful to you and your family? I mean, those are simple things that start right where you are.
And that was, I think, one of the biggest dawnings on me. I love that story, Lloyd. As we kind of went through our journey and I looked at strengths and what brought us joy, I can remember some of our talks when you would share, hey, I can just tell the countenance in your face when you talk about this and how this one puts you to sleep and this one really lights you up. And so having a little bit of that dawning and then realizing that you can do those things in your daily life, that you don't have to go and look out at some big event, that it's a day by day by day by day journey as long as you're intentional about that. In fact, one of the stories that I often think about is I'm in airports a lot as part of my role and job, and I'm traveling a lot and franchising. And I can remember being in one of the airports, and the guy that was working in the counter and cleaning the bathroom was just kind of wiping things down and taking care of things and tearing off paper towel and handing it. And then he would just say, and this guy, think about it, he's just like seeing thousands and thousands of people every day. And he just had a big smile and just say, you have a blessed day today. Are you doing okay? I saw him pull a guy off a side and talk to him. And I was just thinking, oh my God, this guy's just blessing thousands every day. And he's figured that out about himself and his role. And so it doesn't matter where you are, how you bring blessing, as long as you're continuing to bring blessing, right?
Yeah, and if you can align it, Todd, with your unique abilities and the platform you have, or design a platform for your unique abilities. And so just one last thing on that mission or purpose statement is it usually has three components to it. And we spent a lot of time at the 100X Forum kind of deconstructing these, but the summary is, what are you great at? Or what are your strengths? Number one, what are your strengths? Number two, what do you care about? What makes you mad, sad, or glad? Like just read the Wall Street Journal every day for a week and ask yourself, what makes me mad, sad, or glad? And tear those articles out. There's something hidden in that reaction. And then lastly, what difference do you want to make? What would you like to see as the results? So, what are you best at? What do you care about? What are the results you'd like to see? So, my mission is to be a thought leader, helping high capacity business leaders make a kingdom impact, make a lasting impact, one that advances God's agenda here in this world of compassion and kindness and love. So that's what I do. And a mission statement or a purpose statement is a filter. It's a utility tool you pull out of your toolbox when you're confronted with an opportunity, and it's a filter. So there are filter questions I ask that come out of my mission statement. Is this a high capacity leader? Do they lack clarity? You don't need a thought leader if you have complete clarity, because thought leaders help you gain clarity. And do they want to make an impact in this world, or they just want to live a slightly more fulfilling life? If it's yes to all three of those, then it's a yes. See how helpful that is to say no to most of the opportunities so you can say yes to a few important ones.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And so for Christy and I, as an example, you've helped us on our journey and on our path. And we have kind of arrived at the multiplier of multipliers because we've been involved with so many different, both for profit and nonprofit. We're able to sort of grow where we're planted and help some of those high capacity leaders, help them multiply and grow, put a lot of the pieces in place from our experience. And then that's fun and joy for us raising up other leaders, but doing it with integrity and faith and sharing our faith along the journey, helping build culture. So, and you helped us create a set of filters of what we will and won't do, because the time in serving others and serving the Lord has become more important than any of the money or the resources. We've seen God take care of all of the resources. And so it's been a blessing to us to be on that journey. In fact, that was a little bit of why we co-founded and founded the franchise faith community. We started to look and say, wow, we have this network of folks in franchising that we believe that creating a faith-driven community that elevates franchising for a greater purpose makes a lot of sense to us. So a lot of the connectivity and the content and the coaching and the things that we're doing and planning within the franchise faith community, we think is going to make a difference helping others. And that was why this having you on one of our early podcasts was so important to me, because you are kind of the founder and co-author of all of this stuff. So it's really great. Tell us a little bit about the roadmap and kind of how you adjust that journey and how you create that, pull in those perfect metrics, and then hold yourself accountable every year.
Yeah. So, obviously the idea of long-term metrics or key performance indicators for your life has to translate into action plans. Now, Peter Drucker taught us when we were building the Halftime Institute in 1998, that if people have more than 5 goals, they have none. And his point, rather than being sort of a rigid formula, his point was to highlight the importance of focus, that you've got to narrow down the things you're going to work on this year to the most important 3, 4, 5. But if you have 7 or 8 goals, chances are there are going to be 3 that don't get a lot of attention, and they might actually dilute the work you do on the others. So what we've simply done is created a roadmap that you're welcome to share mine, Todd, but with them. But or at the top of the plan is your mission, your metrics. If you're married, your spouse's dream. I can't tell you how many 50, 55-year-old CEOs I coach when I say to them, tell me about Christy's dream in life. If her life turned out perfectly, what's she looking for? What would she like more of and less of? And they look like deer in the headlights. They don't know. I mean, after 43 years of marriage, I don't know what Linda's dream is. Tell me, when the heck am I going to figure it out? And then the next big one is your family vision. You mean you would never run a business without a vision. So we challenge people to create a vision statement for their family long after they're gone. This is not about CEOing your family. It's about serving your family from the bottom, for goodness sakes. So, with those in mind, then what are the action areas? So, usually there's an action area around your family or your marriage or nurturing your teenage kids. And usually there's one around health and wellness. And for goodness sakes, if we don't pay attention to our health, we're going to end up missing out on the last part of life's contribution. And then usually there's one around finances or your business, and there's one around giving back, your calling, your purpose. So what happens is if someone builds a simple plan, call it a roadmap, and they update it every year for the next year. Let's say you put a recurring calendar appointment on your electronic calendar for the first week in December for 90 minutes, and you just said, update my plan for next year and share it with my friends and family. That is the single most important life hack that I can recommend to you because over time, that will have a quantum impact on your life. Now, I share my roadmap every year with our 6 kids, and I ask for their feedback. And if I stuck that up on the screen from the last one we did for this year, I could show you Jenny's feedback and my son-in-law, Chris. They're 32. They live in DC. They're very talented leaders. That they gave me a basic butt kicking. I mean, it has comments all over it, Todd. I've shown it to you, and I'm like, these guys are great at critiquing your plan. Now, 2 things are happening. Number one, I'm accountable. When you show your kids in writing what you're trying to do, where you want to grow, what you'd like to accomplish, you're accountable because they're going to watch. And if you just go golfing the rest of your life, they're going to say, Dad, you said you wanted to be compassionate in this world. Why are you spending all your time on the golf course or out here on Lake Norman? And the second thing that you might not have thought of is that you're teaching your kids how to be chief life officer. If I had to choose between teaching the kids how to be chief executive officer and make a boatload of money, or be chief life officer and live a joyful, meaningful life contributing to others and to God, I'd pick the chief life officer. And yet, how much time do we spend getting our kids into the perfect high school, private high school, and then into the perfect college so that they get the perfect job, so they make more money? And money often ruins families. So what about trying to model for our kids what it looks like to be chief life officer? Not just how to be a macho chief executive officer. So that's my aspirational journey. But I tell you, when you share your roadmap with your friends and kids, it is powerful the feedback you get from them.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, that's great. In fact, I remember you sharing that and sharing kind of how vulnerable you are in front of your children, which is a incredible quality about you, Lloyd. You're always very transparent with many, but the fact that you did that with your kids and that they had pointed out a couple things that they thought were out of line and you kind of took it to heart and made some changes and adapted. And I thought, wow, that's just such a powerful teaching tool in its own right, especially as they look out. Sometimes they think they have the answers. Sometimes we think we have all the answers. We're older and wiser, but that younger generation has some great insight too. And they certainly love you and you love them. So it's amazing. I just feel like in just sharing with you and talking with you that I've gained so much joy and wisdom in our relationship. And just as you've kind of talked this morning, it's just been great spending time with you. And I feel a little bit like just our conversation back and forth reminds me so many of the conversations that we've had, and it's just great to share it with our audience, and to the extent it can help them, it's just really wonderful. I don't know if there's anything else that we should hit on or touch on, or if anything you haven't shared.
One idea I had, Todd, that just came up as you asked a question a minute ago is how do you get started? And there's one way that our audience could get started as a low cost pro, like trying something out, would be if you are a young franchisee and you want to use your franchise for compassion, find a mentor. And we can match you with an older, wiser mentor in just the area of your need, like IT or finance or capitalization or real estate, at ardentmentoring.org. If you go to ARDENT mentoring.org. You'll find two things. Number one, you can download Chris Crane's book and my book, The Social Entrepreneur, for free to gain wisdom of best practices on building a franchise for good. And franchising for good is an incredibly powerful concept because unlike a nonprofit, you got positive cash flow, you can scale, you can hire people.
Right.
And there's so many ways to infuse compassion into your franchise. So if you want to do franchise for good, go find a mentor or somebody who can help you that's faith-based. And ardentmentoring.org is a perfect place. And then if you're an older, wiser person with a little of this same hair coloring that I have, the gray or silver hair, you can mentor young entrepreneurs who want to make a difference like that. And at the same place, all that Ardent Mentoring is doing is matching seasoned leaders like Todd with young emerging leaders that are starting out in the franchise space and want to figure out how to use their franchise for compassion. I've been coaching a guy named Dan Devine who built something called Lighthouse. They're the largest employer of sight impaired people today. Employs sight impaired people in a social enterprise where they do it's a call center. And he's got 550 of these people in Florida, but that's a perfect example that you could franchise that in your community. And you could use your franchising skills as a seasoned franchisor to create a lighthouse ministry in Columbus, Ohio, and employ sight impaired people. Just take a great idea and multiply it. That's where I would say is get clear, get free from the low value stuff in your life and get going. Just try something.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Having read your book, The Social Entrepreneur, I highly recommend it. It's awesome, and that is super generous to offer a download for free of that book if you go to ardentmentoring.org. And so just spell that website again, Ardent. It's ARD.
Mentoring, mentoring.org. And the book link to download it free is right there. It'll pop up for you and you can just explore. I mean, you can see all the multiple of we've got hundreds of organizations we're helping already. You can just check them all out. It's a great
Yeah,
place to get started.
that's great. All right. Well, thank you very much, Lloyd Reeb. Thanks for first being my friend, and thanks for being so faithful to our shared Lord Jesus, and thanks for sharing your heart today and your wisdom and being a part of our program. I appreciate it. Thanks, Lloyd.
You're so welcome.